Our goal in this video is to hook up the bottom navigation view such that when I tap on one of these menu items, we should show the corresponding fragment. Right now, we've moved out all the logic from main activity into compose fragment, but you'll notice that the only place that compose fragment is used is inside of the fragment compose, which doesn't actually mean it's referenced anywhere in main activity. So to start out with, let's first go into activity main, and we're going to change the layout a little bit. Go into the text tab. Let's start with the linear layout. And actually, one thing that's invalid here is that this layout align parent bottom true is invalid in linear layout. That's why it's actually not being pushed. The bottom navigation view is not actually being pushed to the bottom of the screen. In order to make that work, we should change this to be a relative layout. The next thing we'll do is add in a frame layout here, match parent, and we'll also want to give this an ID of FL container, frame layout container. And by default, because this is match parent, this will take up the whole view. But instead, we'd like it to be above the item here. So we'll say layout above, and then pass in the ID of bottom navigation. So now if we go into the text tab, you can see that there's a relative layout. The first element is the frame layout container, and then below that is the bottom navigation. So the reason we added this frame layout is because this is going to be what will contain the fragment that we show. So whenever you tap on one of these, the bottom navigation won't change, but we're going to be swapping out the content inside of this frame layout. So in main activity, here we're going to set up a fragment manager, which will be responsible for changing the fragment which is shown in that frame layout. If you go back to the guide about bottom navigation view, here's a section about using bottom navigation view with fragments, and we want to get support fragment manager. So import that, and now you can see how it's being used down here. So the fragment manager, we begin a transaction and then replace the frame layout with a fragment that we define from our switch statement, and then we commit it. So the way the fragment manager works is that you make changes based on transactions, and then you have the option to replace certain parts of the screen, which is what we're doing here, and then commit means make the change immediately. I'm going to copy this line. And at the end of our switch statement, whatever fragment we define, we're going to swap it out. So we haven't yet defined a fragment for home or profile, but just so that this can compile, in either of these cases, in any of the three, let's define fragment to be a new compose fragment. And we'll just invoke the empty constructor for compose fragment. And then of course, for action home, this is not what we want. So I'm gonna add a to-do here. So update fragment. And similarly for action profile. But now when we run the app, we should be seeing the compose fragment when any of the three are tapped. So if I tap on compose, we do see it, that's good. Profile, see it again, and then again for home. One thing you might have noticed is that when we initially loaded up the app, the frame layout didn't contain any content, which we want to avoid. And the way we can fix that is by setting a default selection on the bottom navigation view. So I'm gonna copy over this. And outside of the item selected listener, we're going to set the default selection, and we can have the default selected item be action home. So now if we run it, we should immediately see that home was pressed. So you can see that toast pop up and the compose fragment is shown. Just to reiterate, what's happening here is we're using a switch statement to look at which of the items in the bottom navigation view, which menu item was selected. Based on that, we create a fragment, and then we replace the frame layout. This is the ID of the frame layout. So we replace the frame layout with the fragment, and then we commit it, which means make the replacement happen immediately. To finish up here, what I want to do is do like proof of concept that we are able to swap out fragments correctly. So instead of showing a compose fragment when the home icon is tapped, I'd like to instead show a posts fragment, something which shows all the posts. That's what will belong inside of this tab. So to do that, we're going to create a new fragment. In here, I'm going to say new fragment, and we're going to create a blank fragment. Let's call this posts fragment. And then like we did for the compose fragment, we want to create an XML layout, but uncheck the other two options. And what this did is it created the fragment, which extends the Android X fragment, and it also created the corresponding layout file. So now if we go back into main activity Instead of creating a compose fragment, let's create posts fragment. And then this should, by default, have the layout shown inside of post fragment, which is hello world or hello blank fragment. Let's look at it. So we have fragment post, and yeah, there's a single text view instead of a frame layout, which is hello blank fragment. So that's what we should see when the app boots up. And there you can see we do. If we go into compose fragment, we swap it out correctly. If I go back into home fragment, we are correctly showing the other fragment. So that bottom navigation view is doing its job correctly. The next step will be to query parse for all the Instagram posts and show them inside of the posts fragment.